How's that for a slice of fried gold?
You think this is a fucking costume? This is a way of life.
I'll be back.
Just a flesh wound. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
Take your sticking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
I'm sorry, Ben. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
Well, hello, and welcome to Cinema Shock. It's the podcast that explores the stories behind your favorite cult genre films. We do all the research so you don't have to. We're the three guys telling you everything you need to know about your favorite movies and the people that made them, so that the next time you're caught up in a nerdy movie conversation, not only will you know what is going on, you might actually be the expert. I'm one of your hosts, Gary Horn.
I'm your other host, Justin Bishop. And I'm going to stop using film historian, which Todd wants me to call myself a film historian, but I took this from Dan Carlin, who some would call a historian. Don't roll your eyes, Todd. That man is a legend.
Thanks, Dan.
He calls
He has
himself
a really successful podcast called Hardcore History.
Yeah, he's great. And he calls himself a fan of history because he doesn't do he's not digging through the archives and things like that. He's reading the research that actual historians have done. So I will now refer to myself as a fan of film history, not a historian myself. So
What are you doing if not reading what is the archives if not the stuff that other people have done?
We'll get into it later.
Film archivist.
I'm not an archivist, though.
Oh, God.
Anyway, introduce yourself, Todd.
Yeah, okay. And I'm writer-comedian Mr. Todd A. Davis. Boom, 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 boom. Now, you may think co-hosting Cinema Shock is all drudgery. Boom, boom. Unwrapping behind-the-scenes stories. And checking our facts against multiple sources. 1, 2, 3. But I love it. And we think that you'll love this 7th final bonus episode of our examination of the life, career of John Waters and his collaborations with Divine in our series titled Divine Filth.
I was not expecting that.
It's the exact same intro I did last week, only I sang it.
Was that singing? I don't know if that counts as singing.
It's the best I can do with what I've got, Justin.
Gary was a
listen. If you're not going to be a film historian, then I'll do whatever I want.
Gary, weren't you a musical theater major?
Yeah.
Wow. So you should just sing this whole episode.
Yep.
No, that's what's funny.
No
is
pressure.
I did do that, and I love musicals.
Over.
I love musicals, and I did do that, and I have no desire to do whatever Todd just did.
That's what I do, fellas. I take the bullets for the show, man.
I mean, honestly, you took a bullet from a gun that you fired yourself, though.
That's true.
There's like 100 different ways to go with that.
The least you can do is call yourself a film historian, Justin Bishop.
Oh, well, so over the course of the last 6 episodes, we have discussed John Waters' career from its beginnings in the underground film scene in Baltimore through his success on the midnight movie circuit and all the way through his somewhat unintentional mainstream breakthrough with his 1988 film Hairspray. And while Hairspray was successful during its theatrical run, and even more so once it hit home video, its greatest success came a couple of decades later when it was adapted into a Broadway musical, which itself was adapted into a film in 2007. So for this, the final episode in our series, John Waters' Divine Filth, we're going to discuss the story behind the aforementioned Broadway show and the musical film remake of Hairspray.
It was a time of tradition, a time of values, a time
People who are different, their time is coming.
To shake things up.
Not in Baltimore, it isn't.
For anyone who ever wanted something bigger.
Dancing on that show is my dream.
comes a time to break all the rules.
Want to be one of the nicest kids in town? Cut school tomorrow and come to audition.
No one in this house is auditioning for anything.
But Ma!
Amber? Save your personal life for the camera, sweetie. Oh, shiny.
When you follow your own beat,
When we get any more white people in here, this is gonna be a suburb.
there's no limit to how far you can go. Hairspray.
This is America. You gotta think big to be big.
Big ain't the problem in this family, Wilbur.
Well, Hairspray's journey to the bright lights of Broadway began around 1990 when it was announced that a producer named Scott Rudin had obtained the rights to develop a stage show based on the film. And then, nothing happened at all. Rudin, he got the rights and then he just didn't do anything with them. He let the rights lapse and the idea kind of disappeared for a while.
It's weird how this works because then in 1998, the project was revived by an independent Broadway producer named Margot Lyon. Lyon's biggest hit as a producer at the time, you might know the two-part play Angels in America. I almost said Angels and Airwaves. Which
very
was the Tom
different.
DeLonge side project. Anyway, Margot Lyon did Angels in America. It was in '93.
Now, didn't that get turned into a series or mini-series or something like that?
Yeah, it was an HBO series which won a lot of awards, I think.
I recall it winning
Al
a lot of
Pacino.
stuff.
Yeah.
It was like Meryl Streep maybe was in it.
That sounds right. Yeah. The play was like a big deal when it came out. It was Tony Kushner. It won a Pulitzer Prize. It won a bunch of Tony Awards. It was a big hit.
Probably boring.
No musical numbers in that one.
Yeah. If it ain't got killing or singing, I ain't interested. Anyway, so Margot's deal was while she's trying to figure out what the next show she might be, she came across Hairspray on television one day. She just started watching it. She got drawn in. She immediately thought this would be an awesome stage musical. Probably right. Lyon reached out to Mark Shyman. I think I said that correctly.
I think it's Shaman.
It might be Shaman. Yeah, he might be a shaman.
I've been saying shaman in my head. So,
so Mark Shaman, he's a musician. He was actually the perfect choice for this because he got to start early on working with Saturday Night Live in the 80s. Collaborated a lot on Rob Reiner stuff. He wrote the music for South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, and Team America World Police, which I didn't realize is going to matter to me a little bit later, and I'll tell you why. But
I just love the idea that this guy wrote America, fuck yeah.
Oh, I do too.
And Uncle Fucker. I mean, he's not the lyricist. He's just writing the music. He's not the lyricist, but he had to contribute to both of those.
That's great. And did some Rob Reiner stuff. So
yeah,
perfect. Anyway, he agreed to work on this thing as long as his writing partner, who was Scott Whitman, could be involved as well. So Lyon agreed to all this. Then they began working on a few initial songs. They recorded a demo with Nathan Lane actually singing the part of Edna Turnblad. That was a missed opportunity. Look at that.
He's great in it. Have you heard it?
No, I haven't heard it.
Oh, there's a great behind the scenes documentary on the Hairspray Blu-ray that I've got that John Waters starts talking about this part, and they actually play a little clip of Nathan Lane singing "You're Timeless to Me" on the demo, and it sounds great. I mean, I love everyone else who's played that part, but Nathan Lane did a pretty stellar job on that.
You can totally see Nathan Lane in that role for sure.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
And once they got that demo, though, Lyon hit up John Waters and gave him a copy of that demo, telling him, "I'll always try to honor your voice. I will not make a generic Broadway show," and got John Waters' blessing. So that led Lyon on the path to secure the rights to the film from, you guessed it, New Line, who's always involved in this.
Well, New Line still owns the rights to Hairspray, so she had to go through them. She was really just going through John Waters to kind of get his blessing. Like, she could have made it without getting John Waters' blessing, but she wanted John Waters to say this was okay. One thing that should also be noted is Margot Lyon was born in Baltimore. So she probably has a bit of a reverence for John Waters, I would imagine, as a lot of artists from the Baltimore area probably do. Oh. Yeah, so she got John Waters, not permission, but his blessing to do this. And then, New Line, she goes through that whole rigmarole, gets the rights to the movie, and then she starts hiring other people to work on it. So first she hires her writers. The book for the musical was written by Mark O'Donnell. And then Thomas Meehan, who had recently had success with another movie turned musical with Mel Brooks's The Producers on Broadway. He was brought in to help kind of punch up the dialogue in it. So Mark O'Donnell and Thomas Meehan kind of co-wrote the book for the play. Then Lion contacted Rob Marshall about directing the musical. So Marshall at the time, I'm sure as a movie fan, you probably recognized Rob Marshall's name, but at the time he was a pretty prominent choreographer and director on Broadway. But when Lion reached out to him, he was actually in negotiations to direct his first film, which was the film version of Chicago. But he agreed that he would help on the development of Hairspray with the caveat that he'd have to drop out of Chicago if that movie ended up moving forward, which, of course, we all know is exactly what ended up happening.
Chicago, also starring Jane Eastwood. That's in the Hairspray, and Queen Latifah.
Yeah. However,
also almost equal to the amount of death that happens per capita yearly in Baltimore.
Chicago almost starred John Travolta as well. They tried to get John Travolta to play the part that eventually went to Richard Gere in Chicago, but he turned it down. He turned down a lot of musicals over the years. Everyone wanted John Travolta for musicals because of Grease, obviously, but he turned most of them down, including Chicago, which I think he later described as a mistake since it won a lot of Oscars. Although Richard Gere is great in it. He is very good in the film. Anyway, what are we talking about? Well, let's not talk about the hamster. That's an urban legend.
Speaking of diving deep into movies, that's what we're all about here on Cinema Shock.
That hamster dove deep is what Todd's saying.
Yeah.
Well, during his time working on the show, Marshall did make some significant contributions to it, including hiring an actress named Melissa Jaron Winokur to play the lead role of Tracy Turnblad, a role for which she would later win a Tony Award for Best Leading Actress, among many other awards that she won for that role. So once Marshall had to move on, start working on the Chicago movie, Margot Lyon hired Broadway veterans Jack O'Brien and Jerry Mitchell to direct and choreograph the show, respectively. And since Divine had played Tracy's mother, Edna, in the original film, Shaman really wanted to maintain the tradition of casting a man in the lead role. And they cast the great Harvey Fierstein as Edna Turnblad. And I love Harvey Fierstein as an actor. I think he is one of the most unique, distinct actors. I mean, everybody knows who he is, even if you don't know his name. If you've seen Harvey Fierstein in a movie, if you've seen, obviously, Mrs. Doubtfire or Independence Day, he's very memorable in Independence Day. I mean, those are probably the two of the more mainstream roles he's been in. But even if you didn't know his name, I guarantee you remembered his voice.
I was going to say, he has a very distinct, honey, I'm so happy.
Yeah.
David, why did I just send my mother to Atlanta?
That was really good.
Thank you.
That was good.
Well, after a successful tryout run in Seattle, Hairspray opened on Broadway at the Neil Simon Theater on August 15th, 2002. And the musical was a huge success, both critically and commercially. It was nominated for 13 Tony Awards at the 2003 ceremony, winning 8 of those 13, including the awards for Best Musical, Book, Score, and Direction. Winokur, Fierstein, and Dick Latessa, who played Wilbur Turnblad, all received awards for their performances in the play. And the production ran for more than 6 years for a total of 2,642 performances. And it would later open in London's West End. It opened in Australia. It opened in Las Vegas for a while. And it has been on regular national and international tours consistently since 2003. Well, all this means is that when New Line, who optioned the rights to Margot to make the play, when they started seeing the success that the show was being met with on Broadway, they started seeing dollar signs, and they got to work pretty much immediately on adapting the stage show into a musical film.
Because they're smart thinkers, that New Line.
Well, they're in the business to make money. You're leaving money on the table if you don't try to adapt this into a film at this point. So New Line hired Craig Zadan and Neil Marin to executive produce Hairspray. Now, Zadan and Marin, they had a long history of adapting Broadway shows to film and television. They had done the Cinderella that was with Brandy and Whitney Houston and Whoopi Goldberg. I think it aired on NBC. back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and that was a huge success. And they had actually recently served as executive producers on Rob Marshall's Chicago, which of course won the Oscar for Best Picture. So they've got a pretty good track record at this point.
Yeah, I forgot all about that ever being a thing.
Yeah, Chicago's great. I love that movie.
Do you remember when Brandy did that song "The Boy Is Mine" with Monica?
I sure do. I think about it every day.
How hot Monica is! Oh my God. I mean, Brandy too. She could get it. But
yeah, Moesha herself. Well, Thomas Meehan and Mark O'Donnell, who are the authors of the book for the stage musical, they wrote the first draft of the screenplay for the Hairspray movie, but they were later replaced by Leslie Dixon, who was an experienced screenwriter who had worked on movies such as Mrs. Doubtfire and the 2003 Freaky Friday remake. So they had some experience with, I guess, movies where a guy dresses up in drag and Mrs. Doubtfire and, family-friendly stuff like Freaky Friday. But it did take the producers nearly an entire year to find a director that they felt would do the material justice. Like, they talked to the guy who they ended up eventually getting, they started talking to over a year before he was actually hired. And that guy was a director named Adam Shankman. Now, Shankman's background is pretty interesting. I kind of took a dive into his history as a director because I knew that he came from stage first, but I didn't know exactly how his journey from stage to Hairspray went. And it was pretty interesting to me, honestly. So he worked, his background in show business began in the world of dance. He was actually trained at Juilliard. And then after college, he worked on several music videos, first as a dancer, then as a choreographer, working for acts like Tony, Whitney Houston, and Aaron Neville, before moving into television, where he became the go-to choreographer on Friends and The Ellen DeGeneres Show. He also served as a choreographer and dance consultant on dozens of movies, including Addams Family Values, Catch Me If You Can.
Also starring Christopher Walken. Catch Me.
Not Boogie Nights.
Not Boogie Nights. although that would have been pretty great.
Walken as Dirk Diggler would have been classic, honestly.
I'm a star. A bright shining star.
Oh God. I don't know a whole remake of that movie with that now.
No, don't say that. Don't treat me that way.
Well, in 1998, Shankman wrote and directed a short film that screened at the Sundance Film Festival, which led to him landing his first feature directing job on the 2001 Jennifer Lopez, Matthew McConaughey romantic comedy, The Wedding Planner. Not what you would think a choreographer would go to, because it is not a musical. I don't remember if there are any dance sequences in it. Maybe there are, but I don't know. He basically got that job, though, because his sister is a producer, a film producer. And after The Wedding Planner, him and his sister actually started their own production company. So I think she's actually a producer on all, or at least most, of his films going forward. I think it's called Offspring Productions is what they call their production company. So that's how he got involved with that film. And that film was a big success. And Shankman went on to direct several other big studio films, like kind of movies made for the masses is kind of what he's doing. He did A Walk to Remember. He did Cheaper by the Dozen 2, Bringing Down the House, and The Pacifier, starring, of course, Vin Diesel, who we will bring up on Cinema Shock any chance we get.
Yeah.
Hell yes, we will. And that movie's a lot of fun. So
I've never seen it.
And it's also
good.
It's also all about family.
It's also very obviously originally intended for Jackie Chan. And once you know that and you watch it, you can't unsee that. But Vin does a fine job.
Yeah. As he always does.
Of course.
But Hairspray was the first film that Shankman directed where he was really able to get back to those stage roots. Because when New Line hired him, when they finally hired him to direct the film, they also agreed to allow him to serve as the film's choreographer as well. So he's not just directing, but he's actually choreographing all of the dance numbers, all of the musical numbers, and everything, which is normally the job of two different people. But he's got the background for it.
So he did the right thing when he was told he'd gotten the job. He paid reverence, as all of these people seem to. So props to them. One of the first things that Shankman did was he reached out to John Waters, and Shankman happened to be in Baltimore at the time. He was producing Step Up, and Waters agreed to meet him for lunch the next day. At lunch, Waters gave Shankman the same advice he'd given the producers of the Broadway show. He said, quote, "I am now saying to you, you have to do your own thing. The story is only good when it's told that way."
Yeah, which is a good advice, I think. I mean, you don't want to just do Hairspray like the John Waters. If you're just doing the same exact thing again, then what's the point, kind of, you know?
Right.
So, that's pretty good advice because obviously it had worked for the Broadway show. But after their meeting, Waters took Shankman on a tour of the area of Baltimore where most of the original film had been shot. So he wanted him to see like the real Baltimore because he wanted him to be able to imbue that into the film. Well, when Leslie Dixon was hired to write that screenplay, one of her main goals was to tone down the campiness that was inherent to the stage version. However, the script itself is still primarily based on the musical rather than the 1988 film. Like that's what she was going by, was the musical itself. So several changes that had been made for the stage adaptation remain in the film version. Some of those changes include dropping several characters, including Arvin Hodgepile, who was the racist station manager that Devine played in the film, when Devine played the male role in the film. Oh, yeah. They also took out Velma's husband, Franklin, Sonny Bono's character. Corny's assistant, Tammy, which was a role originated by Mink Stoll, although there is a member of the Corny Collins committee that's named Tammy, I think in kind of a reference to that, which I thought was fun. And they removed the beatniks played by Rick Ocasek and Pia Zadora.
Another thing they also removed in this movie was the Tilton Acres amusement park and the subsequent race riot that happened. All that got taken out of the story and made Velma Von Tussle the station manager at the TV studio.
Yeah, I think they replaced the race riot with kind of a peaceful protest, kind of thing instead. So you get the same gist without. Obviously,
we can't talk about that.
You can't put it. You can't. It's hard to do an amusement park riot on stage, I guess.
Yeah, you can make a race riot anywhere,
right? Well, yeah, but to keep it on the stage is difficult without it spilling out into the aisles. Well, in both the original film and the stage version, Tracy is arrested and taken to jail after joining the protest at the TV studio. But this subplot was actually removed from the script for the 2007 film. Dixon also restructured some parts of the stage musical's book to allow some of the songs to blend more naturally into the plot. For example, in her screenplay, Dixon created a new subplot that doesn't exist in the original film or in the stage show, where Velma tries to break up Edna and Wilbur's marriage in an attempt to kind of keep Tracy off of the Corny Collins show. So when she did that, she moved the placement of the song "You're Timeless to Me" to be after the scene, where it kind of acts as an apology from Wilbur to Edna rather than the tongue-in-cheek declaration of love it had been in the stage show.
And I mean, honestly, like narratively, that's pretty brilliant.
It is. I mean, it works.
Being able to repurpose it that way. I mean, in light of John Waters' advice to them before they started, it seems like they really, really put that thought in, and it
flows a little bit better. It gives the movie a better flow even than the stage show has, I think.
Yeah, and with the chemistry of Travolta and Walken, like it works really, really well. It's a great scene.
Oh yeah. It's one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie, actually. Yeah. Hairspray was greenlit with a budget of $75 million. Now, that is, if you're keeping count, that is more than 30 times the cost of Waters' original film. One of the first orders of business on this was to find an actress to play Tracy Turnblad. So after auditioning over 1,100 actresses, the role went to Nikki Blonsky, a high school student from Great Neck, New York, who had absolutely no previous professional experience in acting or singing.
What's wild with Nikki Blonsky is that just how confident she seems. And that's like legit. She says she thinks she got it from her parents, just how confident she is. I was watching the commentary on the Blu-ray and they were kind of talking about that. That's what stood out to them, just that how comfortable she seemed in her own body and just willing to do whatever and learn the dances and just being just out there. I think the director was saying that like they had a running joke on the movie set. They were like, was this girl just bored on a soundstage? What is she doing? And she says her grandma just gave her like the best advice when she was a little girl and she was a little overweight. She said, people who make fun of you are insecure about themselves, so you can't care what other people think. And she said that she also took that a step further. She always realized that I don't care what they think, and seems to make them feel good if they make fun of me, so whatever, I'm fine.
Guess that's one way of looking at it. I think when Adam Shankman called her and told her she had gotten the part, she was like working at a Cold Stone Creamery. Yeah, I mean, just a high school job, and then she gets called and says, hey, you got the lead in a major studio film. which is insane. So she got that job through a rigorous audition process. Through a similar audition process, relative unknowns Elijah Kelly and Taylor Parks were cast in the roles of Seaweed and Little Inez Stubbs. By the way, so yeah, a little side note about Taylor Parks, because I looked into her a little bit, because I was curious like what else she had done after this, because she's obviously very young in this. And now she is primarily, she's a singer, but more known as a songwriter, actually. And she's co-written some pretty big songs. Like she did co-wrote Thank You Next by Ariana Grande, which is, I mean, huge. One of Ariana Grande's biggest singles. So she's, I don't know that she's doing a lot of acting these days, but she has transitioned into a music career full time, it seems.
Good for her. Like I know on the Negro Day stuff, like I forget one of the dancers was like the wife of the star of like Step Up or something, but there was like one of the Pussycat Dolls is
really
dancers and stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Crazy. Yeah.
Well, for the role of Tracy's mother, Edna, the producers wanted to keep the tradition alive of casting a male actor in that role. And executives at New Line, they expected the part to be filled by an actor known for playing in comedies, So they started throwing around names like Robin Williams, who we already made a joke about him being in drag in a movie. He would have honestly been great in the role. They threw around names like Robin Williams, Steve Martin, Tom Hanks, like guys known for doing comedy. But Craig Zadan and Neil Marin, they fought hard to get John Travolta in the role, seeing as how he had starred in one of the most successful movie musicals of all time, Grease.
Never heard of it.
Actually, I think it was the most successful musical of all time until Hairspray came along. Or maybe it was, I think it was. I think until Hairspray came along, it was like the highest grossing movie musical of all time at this point.
Wow.
Can I also establish that I don't think it's okay to say Negro now, but that was the name of the day. And the movie.
And then we know. They make a joke about it.
Was,
They even make a joke about it in the movie that they don't make in the original John Waters movie. They make a joke about it in this one, where one of the kids at Motormouth Maybell's record shop says, "Yeah, we could do without the nomenclature," or something along those lines.
The director said that was an issue that they discussed. Like some of the producers were like, "Are we like making it okay to say that again by doing this or not?"
No, I mean,
like
if you're
concerned about it,
if you're being true to this being set in 1962, it's accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. But, another thing I saw, like when this was released, there were like all these articles like talking about this. It's like the last time you'd see John Travolta do anything like this was Grease. And that's the last time he sang and danced and all this stuff. But, I know Saturday Night Fever had already happened, but don't forget Staying Alive. He's in Staying Alive.
I think he would like to forget Staying Alive, honestly.
Well, I watched them not too long ago, so I was thinking of that. And I was like, brother was dancing in that.
Yeah.
And,
directed by Sylvester Stallone, oddly enough.
Another thing when I was thinking about this that I stumbled across because I wanted to double check the timeline was that the performance that John Travolta does in Staying Alive, the show he's in, is called Satan's Alley, by the way. And the reason that stood out to me because that is also the name of the gay priest movie that Robert Downey Jr. and Tobey Maguire are in Tropic Thunder. And I always wonder, if they do that.
I bet it's a reference of some weird reference that Ben Stiller was making. That's all I can guess.
Yeah.
That's funny. Wow. For Edna's husband, Wilbur, the role, of course, the great Jerry Stiller played in John Waters films.
Jerry.
The production cast Christopher Walken after Travolta actually asked that Walken be considered for the role. Other actors who had been considered before that included Billy Crystal and Jim Broadbent, both of whom would have been pretty great in that. Jerry Stiller, by the way, if you're paying attention, he does appear in a small, it's not quite a cameo. It's a little bit bigger than a cameo, but a small role here where he plays Mr. Pinky, the owner of Mr. Pinky's Hefty Hideaway.
Nikki says she was, this Nikki Blodsky, she said she was nervous to work so closely with so many great actors, especially though up close with John Travolta for one. But she says she was terrified of working with Christopher Walken. Because he's,
I mean, who wouldn't be?
Anyway, but she also thought it was a peak moment for her to have her face on his bow tie. She said, you've made it when Christopher Walken's wearing you on his suspenders and stuff.
I have definitely decided that when I am an old man, I'm going to dress like Christopher Walken dresses in this movie. That's my old man goals.
I just wish my old dad loved me enough to wear me on his.
What's the age cutoff for that, Justin? When are you going to
45? 45.
45?
Yeah,
okay.
So not very. It won't be long.
I was going to say that is right around the corner, dude.
So Travolta also had a hand in casting for Velma Von Tussle, the villain of the film that Debbie Harry, of course, played in the original. And he suggested Michelle Pfeiffer, which makes for a fun Grease 2 connection, I think. I'm sure a lot of people got a kick out of that. Velma's daughter, Amber, is played by Brittany Snow, who she's kind of a scream queen these days, Brittany Snow is. Adam Shankman had actually worked with her on The Pacifier, so that's how she got involved. Hayden Panettiere had actually been in consideration for that role, but she ended up passing because she was about to begin work on the TV show Heroes.
Jamal Sims was one of the choreographers on this movie, and he's the guy who choreographed like Run and Tell That. He was big on the movie, but anyway.
Jamal Sims is a regular on RuPaul's Drag Race, so we are very aware of who Jamal Sims is in the Bishop.
Well, yeah, and he goes on to be a director too. I think but the reason actually I was going to say is he's a director too now, and I think he did Grease: The Rise of the Pink Ladies. So all of Grease is referenced here.
That's fun. That's a fun little connection there.
Yeah, I assume that Travolta recommended Michelle Pfeiffer and Christopher Walken because he's a fan of Batman Returns.
That's probably what it is.
That's my best guess.
That's probably
also a great musical comedy.
Yeah,
it's got dance numbers in it.
That's true. Now, if you watch the commentary, Shankman says that Michelle Pfeiffer was the first person that he wanted. So maybe he meant like after Travolta suggested it.
Well, Travolta claims that I read a New York Times profile of John Travolta that came out that in conjunction with this movie. And during the course of that interview, he claims that he suggested Michelle Pfeiffer to be cast in the role. So, that's his side of the story.
Yeah, Shankman says in the commentary that like he just has a story about it, basically saying that Pfeiffer was the first person I wanted. I always wanted to work with her, and I honestly didn't even think she'd be interested in this, but this was the chance for him to shoot a shot. And so he set up a dinner with her, and it sounds like on the day it happened, he almost missed his chance because he said when she walked in and started talking to him, he just like couldn't speak anymore. Like, he was so starstruck by her.
I mean, I would be, I would do the same thing in the presence of Michelle Pfeiffer.
Right. And you might think at this point in her career, she's pretty chill, but like by all accounts, like she was like almost killing the dancers because she wanted to rehearse so much. Like she was always out there worrying about, there was an article in Film Journal International that like she, the Big Blonde and Beautiful song was added in at her suggestion to replace a scene that was scripted in there. She said,
but that song's in the original Broadway musical.
That's what they said in there. I don't know. Maybe they were going to cut it and added it back in or something.
Well, no, like, they were going to cut Miss Baltimore Crabs, which is the song that she sings, which is like her big number. The guys who wrote the music for the Broadway show and the musical, they had written a few that was a song that apparently when it was on Broadway was like one of the least popular songs, the Miss Baltimore Crabs, because it's a little different stylistically, than some of the other songs in it. So when they started working on the movie, they wrote several other songs to replace it with to have Michelle Pfeiffer do, and she was like, yeah, but I want to do Miss Baltimore Crabs. Like that's what I signed on for because I like that song. Is what they told them.
So, maybe they messed up the song because she wanted a chance to sing and do her thing in there. I also saw like in a couple of places.
Beautiful is Motormouth Maybell's song, so she's not even involved in that scene.
Yeah. Okay. So either I wrote that down wrong, or they wrote it down wrong. I think I just copied it over from them. So
yeah.
Film Journal International. They're also though. At a couple of places, I saw this rumor that it wasn't until halfway through that she realized that her character is actually racist. So I don't know if that's true.
Her character saying we want to steer them in the white direction did not like tip her off a little bit.
She thought that was a typo.
I mean, she doesn't do a lot of musicals is the thing. So like getting her was kind of a big deal. She very rarely does musicals. She's only done a couple since Grease 2, but she has a phenomenal voice. Like she crushes that especially that song, Miss Baltimore Crab. Like she really like kills it because she has to hit some notes at the end of that song that are very impressive. Like, and she does a great job, I think. Speaking of impressive vocalists, they wanted Aretha Franklin originally for the role of Motormouth Maybelle Stubbs, which would have been great, honestly. But the part would ultimately go to Queen Latifah, who had worked with Shankman on bringing down the house, and had also worked with Zayden and Miron, as Todd mentioned earlier, on the film version of Chicago. And she also is absolutely incredible in the role, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, they brought her in, and she there was one story about the song "You Can't Stop the Beat," and the cast would like call that song "You Can't Stop to Breathe."
Yeah,
And,
there's a lot of
'cause it
words
was,
in
like,
that
so
song.
fast paced. Yeah, and they were like talking to her about it. They were like, "Are you having trouble getting all the words in?" And blah blah blah. And she was like, "Do you know what I did for a living?"
Right. If anyone's going to nail it, it's her. So for the role of Link Larkin, Shankman cast Zac Efron. He actually didn't want to cast Zac Efron at first because he thought he was too teeny bopper. And his sister, the producer, talked him into getting Efron on there because she was like, we've got a built-in audience. All these kids who watched High School Musical will come watch this because Zac Efron's in it. He's like he is a teeny bopper, but that's actually a plus for the film, for the box office at least. And he's great in it anyway, so he's awesome. Amanda Bynes is great in this. She plays Penny Pingleton, which is a perfect role for her because Amanda Bynes is kind of weird, and Penny Pingleton's kind of weird. And then veteran character actor Allison Janney plays Penny's mother, Prudy, and Allison Janney is just wonderful in this role, I think. James Marsden was cast as Corny Collins, beating out former New Kids on the Block member Joey McIntyre and Marsden's X-Men co-star Hugh Jackman for the role.
Get him! Cyclops gets his revenge.
Yeah. Honestly, Hugh Jackman's a great song and dance guy. You know, I mean, we've all seen The Greatest Showman. Like, he's really good. But James Marsden fucking is Corny Collins in this.
Yeah,
he is phenomenal in the role. Like when we were watching this the other day, me and Bunny watch this movie quite often and listen to the soundtrack quite often. But she commented when we were watching it the other night, she's like, nobody else could be Corny Collins. Like he is like, it's like the role was written for him. He's so good in that role. Like he is perfectly corny as he should be. He's doing all the winks and points and like all the stuff, you know, like the really goofy Rat Pack stuff, you know. That it is just perfect for that character, I think.
Yeah, like every time he's on the screen, I think like Shape says something like, God, Jimmy's so good, I want to kick him right in the face. There's a career breakdown he does with Vanity Fair on YouTube, and he talks about when he was up for Hairspray, Ashton Kutcher and Jake Gyllenhaal were up for it. He said that he told his agent, if they're not interested or not available, I'll just wait in the wings like I do. He said that was exactly how he'd acted when he had gotten Cyclops. Because it was like Jim Caviezel was going to be Cyclops originally ahead of him or something is what they said. Anyway, he got a meeting for Hairspray with the producers Craig Zadan and Neil Moran and Adam Shankman. And he said it was at this little bar off Broadway one afternoon, and they were just going to talk about the role. But when they were in the bar, they happened to be sitting there, and Julia Roberts came up to them and tapped James Marsden on the shoulder and said, I'm sorry to interrupt you guys, but I loved you in The Notebook. You're amazing. And I said, gave him an awkward hug, and he turned back to the table and said, holy shit, I bet that got me the job. And he said he sat down, and they were like, well, holy shit, that got you the job.
That's great. I love that. What a great story. Also, if Julia Roberts tapped me on the shoulder in a restaurant, which let's be honest, would never happen, I would literally pass away right then and there. Like deceased. Had a good life. Well, I guess that brings us to Todd's favorite segment. At least, hopefully, you're going to get some bites on this one. You finally got one name last time, right? So we had one name, one Star Trek alum on this entire 7-part series so far. Are you going to add any more to the list this week?
Well, folks, I am happy to report that I am about to double those numbers. we got one more. Yeah, this week, Mr. Paul Dooley, who plays Mr. Spritzer. I think he's the station owner, or
is he the guy who is in charge?
He's the guy that fires Velma at the end. Yeah,
he's the guy who's in charge of the hairspray company, or like the I don't know.
Oh, is he the executive producer or the sponsor?
Yeah, he's the sponsor. He works for the hairspray company who sponsors the show. Yeah.
He did 4 episodes of Deep Space Nine as Enabran Tain back in the day.
Is that a human character, or is that like a?
That is not a human character. No.
Doesn't sound human.
yeah. Paul Dooley is he's one of those character actors you see a lot. He's in a lot of like Christopher Guest movies and things like that. Dude,
we saw him pop up recently.
Did we?
Well, we talked about it very briefly. If you remember, he was the guy that was replaced by Jim Brewer at the end of Little Shop of Horrors because he had filmed the ending.
Not Jim Brewer.
Not Jim
definitely not Jim Brewer.
We're gonna plant Audrey 2s everywhere.
That plant's freaking me out, man.
Yeah, man.
I think you mean Jim Belushi, I believe is who you're referring to, which
that is oh God. I'm sorry, my references were more to his more recent stand-up. I don't know if you guys have seen Jim.
Where he just makes a bunch of weird noises, yeah.
Okay.
That's his
Making
idea
sure that
of a
joke landed.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jim Belushi at the end of Little Shop of Horrors, we talked about how they had to replace the ending. There's a director's cut of Little Shop of Horrors where you can see Paul Dooley was the guy that was originally in that part, but he was unavailable to reshoot it.
Yeah.
The ending.
Because if you watch the director's cut of it, he's in it. He meets with him on the roof or whatever. You're right.
Yeah.
Paul Dooley was also, for another weird Cinema Shock connection, he was also the creator of the Electric Company. He was one of the show, the Electric Company, which of course we talked about a good bit during one of our Spider-Man episodes.
Oh, and that's everybody in Star Trek.
Again, let Todd have his moment. I can't believe there was only one in this. That was kind of surprising to me. But not a lot of song and dance numbers in Star Trek, although there are some.
And they're becoming more frequent day by day. Yeah,
there should just be a whole Star Trek musical television show. I would watch it.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm in for it, and I'm down to see all the Star Trek bros heads explode because of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they deserve it. So once casting was complete, the whole cast gathered together to do a read through, which is, that's pretty standard on a movie. You get all the cast together, cast and crew, director, everybody gets together and does a read through of the script. They sit at tables in kind of a semicircle usually, and we all read through the script for the first time together, right? So that's very standard, except for in this case, the read through included musical numbers. So anytime that they would get to a musical number in the script, the person who had that number would get up with a microphone and they would sing the song. So you've seen the movie. What's the very first thing in the movie? Is a song. It's Nikki Blonsky singing Good Morning Baltimore. So when they're doing this read through, Nikki Blonsky, who again has no experience making movies or performing in front of audiences professionally in any way, they start the read through, and the first thing they have to do is she has to get up and she has to get a microphone and she has to sing this song in front of the likes of John Travolta, Michelle Pfeiffer, Christopher Walken, and Queen Latifah, all of whom she's just met. And she has to be the first one to sing in front of everyone. Like that takes a special kind of person to be able to pull that off.
Oh, yeah.
It goes back to what I was saying before about that natural confidence. Like, can you imagine how intimidating that is?
Just being in a corner of that room and not having to say a word would be intimidating to me.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it was just like, just to even have to speak, let alone sing a number in front of all these people. Like, she talked about being scared of Christopher Walken, and she even in the commentary at one point talks about, she was like, I never got a chance to tell Queen Latifah, like I was too nervous to ever tell her, but like I grew up like idolizing her and all that stuff. So it's like, wow, if that's true, then this is a weird spot for you, buddy.
Right. Filming for Hairspray took place in Toronto in the fall and winter of 2006. So while the film, like John Waters' original movie and the musical adaptation, is set in Baltimore, Toronto was chosen as the filming location because the city was better equipped with the sound stages necessary to film a musical. So you got to film this is pretty much all on sound stages, because with a musical and the choreography and all that, like it's very hard to film on location. In fact, the opening shots of the film, which is that descent from the clouds, the camera starts up in the clouds and comes down, which is a a shot that references both West Side Story and The Sound of Music. And then it kind of zooms down on a newspaper guy throwing a newspaper onto a stoop. That shot, that establishing shot of Baltimore, is actually the only time that the actual city of Baltimore appears in the film. Everything else was shot in Canada.
Yeah, that's so weird. They also shot in Hamilton as well, which is just like an hour away from Toronto, I think. But I bring it up because apparently there's these scenes where, like, well, especially one that I'm thinking of right off the bat is like Trudy first meets Zac Efron, and they do that "I Can Hear the Bells" song, and that's pretty interesting because Shankman had like, there's a lot of interesting ideas going on, and so much with her, like following her walking through a hallway and doing all this different stuff. It's more dynamic than if you go like see the live play of it,
right?
But they shot that in different locations, so it's not like one steady shot how it feels. You know, they're obviously very good at that, but they shot it in actually two different places, had her go into different spots. Like, I think the scene of her coming out of the bathroom stall with the bridal stuff on was like the last shot of the movie that they actually filmed. But he did all that and had all this stuff going on. It's a good thing he did, because apparently the producers, when they saw it, they were like, this is one of the songs we were going to cut out of this movie, but now you've made it interesting, and so we can't. So we had to leave it in. And so I'll give him that. One of my favorite things about what Shankman does in this movie, and you can tell he's like a choreography guy or knows choreography, because all the time, like, elements are happening behind everything else. You got your foreground story, and then there's other stuff happening constantly, which is like, that's a musical thing, but like there's actually like more complex stuff happening. The only thing I can think of right now is like in the beginning when Courtney Collins knocks up that girl Brenda, who's the one that Trudy's gonna replace. Like,
Tracy.
You
said Trudy.
Oh, sorry. Tracy replaced. Like, you know, because there's like Michelle Pfeiffer goes up to the girl Brenda, and it's like, this is all background. Like, there's other stuff happening up front, but she like talks to her, is talking about her gut, like she's getting pudgy.
You can see her. You can see her putting her hands like on her belly. Yeah.
And then after that scene, there's another scene. You can see her looking sad, and another scene in the background. If you watch her, she's like talking to James Marsden, and they're arguing back and forth. And then a little bit later, you finally get the payoff for that. That like, he's like, well, she's got to go away for like 9 months and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
It like tells us that basically Courtney Collins knocked up this girl.
I mean, I don't think it's implied that it was Courtney Collins that did it.
I feel like it was.
It's implied that she has. I mean, it is pretty explicitly stated that she is pregnant, but I don't think there's anything that says that Courtney Collins did it. Where are you getting that from?
Because they're having the discussion, and because the director said it on the commentary.
Oh, well, I don't think there's anything in the film that supports that, to be honest. I don't think there's anything in the film to support that he was the one who did that, but yeah, maybe that's what they were thinking when they were filming it.
You can just tell he cares a lot about this background stuff, like the all of the choreography works. Like I think he said they saw upwards to like 3,000 people for like just roles in the background dance. He said he was like, oh, I didn't see 3,000. I saw like 2, but like I said, like guys out into the world to like look at people. And then like Nikki Blonsky's like, well, they must be so honored that they were chosen. He's like, they'll be honored when they get their residuals.
Well, one of my favorite things about the film is John Travolta's portrayal of Edna. I love Edna. I love John Travolta in the role. I love how different it is from every other version of this character. So as we know, Divine, who played Edna in the original film, was naturally big boned, right? Travolta is not. Travolta is a much thinner than Divine was, or Harvey Fierstein. So Travolta had to be outfitted with a fat suit and prosthetics in order to be transformed into the character. And that prosthetic suit was created by Tony Gardner, who's a makeup and special effects designer who's worked on everything from the Jackass movies to Cinema Shock favorites, The Return of the Living Dead, where he created the half-corpse puppet, with a very memorable scene in that film. And of course, Sam Raimi's Darkman and Army of Darkness. So he is a Cinema Shock guy, this Tony Gardner, but he also does musicals, or at least in this one case he did a musical. So he created this fat suit that Travolta wears throughout the film. And Gardner and Travolta actually collaborated pretty closely on Edna's look, with Travolta wanting her look to be what he called a curvy girl who grew up to be a mom.
Nailed it.
Travolta's main want was, he said he like thought Edna's outfits should be like tighter on the body to show the figure. Like he saw her as a woman who was basically Sophia Loren back in the day, is how Shakeman said he described her.
Well, she's got that like hourglass figure. She still has that. She still has a waist and everything. And so he wanted her to have that voluptuous like hourglass figure. She's just gotten a little bit bigger than she had probably hoped to.
Shakeman says the main thing he just cared about was that we need to see John Travolta's big, beautiful blue eyes, and we need that Travolta chin on camera.
Yeah. Except, the majority of everything else on that chin is prosthetic.
There's rubber there.
Yeah. I mean, which they did intentionally, and it actually covers up like Travolta's beard, like where his beard would grow, so that like halfway through filming a 12-hour day, he doesn't have stubble growing through, the makeup. So
right.
I mean, that suit is like a full body suit. Like it goes down to the feet. Like the feet are prosthetic. Like John Travolta was fully encased in that thing.
Oof.
John Travolta's like a nice sized guy anyway. I think he's like 6 something.
He's pretty tall. Yeah.
So that leads us into a few fun facts I just saw that I picked up randomly, and I don't know where else they go, which is that in the scene with the march where Tracy is walking at the head of the line there, and Edna runs up behind her to like see what's going on. Apparently John Travolta couldn't see what was happening there, and accidentally the first time just plowed right over her, knocked her off the curb, and like in the street, just linebackered her, like, just took her out. But I just thought that was interesting. They were like, he's very strong. Like even when he bent over to help me, he just like one armed me, like just picked me up, and was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Okay. They showed the scene where Edna and Tracy like go to they're together and they're walking out of the street, and they look into the bar, and there's the pregnant women smoking and drinking. They did point out in the commentary, Shakeman said that is John Waters' favorite scene. He told me.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah. Other than his own scene, maybe, where he plays the flasher, which I don't think we've mentioned, but he does play the flasher during Good Morning Baltimore.
I thought it was interesting. They mentioned they get their hair done, and then Tracy gets Edna gets the hair like Tracy, but then Tracy gets the beehive hairdo with the pins in it. Mm-hmm. They said they stole that directly from Barbra Streisand in the movie Funny Girl. That's her hairstyle there. But they said that like when the movie was coming out, photos released of it, and one of those photos was released, and they said they got like so much shit for that photo because people were like, how dare you change her hair and give her like a beehive hairdo and all this stuff. People were like, for some reason, very pissed about this. The other fun fact I want to talk about is not something I saw anywhere, but it's just something that stood out in my mind both times that I saw this movie recently.
Right.
And nobody acknowledges it, but I swear to God, it is a thing. But the scene where they sing the song where Tracy and what's her face with the lollipops break out,
Penny,
and she gets in the car with the crew that she should not be with. I want to say like the black people, but this seems like a weird thing to say. But
I mean that's who she's in the car with.
Yeah. She gets in the car with the blacks. But Zac Efron is in a different room and he is singing. And during one part of the song, besides where he's like lusting over the picture of Tracy that he keeps under his pillow, obviously spanking it too, he pulls out a candy bar.
Yeah, the Baby Ruth.
The Baby Ruth.
He's in her room.
Yeah, that's her room.
He goes to her.
Oh, is that?
Oh, he shows up at her family's apartment. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. All right, I was messing up. Anyway, he gets the Baby Ruth and he lays back on the bed and he's like singing into it. He's singing into it, I guess. It's a microphone. It's open. The chocolate bar sticking out. And he shoves it in his mouth. And the very fucking next scene of that movie is she's in the car. Lollipop friend. I keep forgetting her name.
Penny.
Penny is in the car, head covered by a blanket in the crotch of the black guy that she's dating. So I'm like, chocolate bar, she's in the black guy's crotch.
You're reading way too much into that, I believe.
Where's this going, Gary? I need you to explain in more detail.
She blew that young man that night. That's all I'm saying. She loves lollipops.
Good morning, Baltimore.
Zac Efron shoves a chocolate bar into his mouth right as it goes to that scene.
I think you're probably
Fuck
reading
you.
into that. This is a psychological thing with you, Gary. This is a subconscious thing with you, I think.
No, I don't mean like fuck you because it happened. I mean fuck you for pretending it didn't. I mean, it's fine. I'm just saying. She blew him. That's awesome. I'm trying to get across. Anyway,
point taken. Well, Hairspray opened on July 20th, 2007. It brought in $27.5 million its opening weekend, which made it the biggest opening ever for a movie based on a Broadway musical, which was a record that was broken the following year when Mamma Mia came out. But it opened at number 3 at the box office, just behind Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which is not a surprise. And surprisingly, number 2 was Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry, which is a movie that I forgot existed until doing the research for this episode.
Don't deny the power of ABBA and early
and
aughts. Adam Sandler and Kevin James.
I would never doubt the power of ABBA. Mamma Mia is a very fun movie. But that was the next year. That was not, they were not in competition at this point. But all in all, Hairspray brought in just over $200 million at the worldwide box office and was well received by both audiences and critics alike. Although, if we have learned anything over the years of doing this podcast, it is that you can't please everyone, especially people on the internet.
I don't know why you say that. It's like people on the internet are perfectly accepting of all races, creeds, sexualities, everything. Men in drag never bother anybody.
Right.
It's okay. Anyway, yeah, we went online and found out some people need a nap. All right. So there's a lot of variations. There's Joe here who gave it a half star. Said it's white people's West Side Story. That's what he said.
What is West Side Story, if not also white people's West Side Story?
The Neil 22 calls it in their title racist crap. That's what he says. It's going to be interesting. What a dreadful piece of racist crap this movie is. Take away all the repetitive and thoroughly boring music and the frantic dancing, and you have racist screed. White people are, unless they are grossly fat and or in Barney drag, ugly racists of the worst kind. But black people are just the absolute best folk ever with not a mean bone in their bodies. Remember that the next time you see a thin blonde woman, that she really has a KKK hood and a bunch of nooses in her Fendi bag, and bro, she's looking to lynch you and put you down. The message must not and should not be accepted as okay, just because it's all overlaid with a hyper-musical score. Hairspray ain't cute or entertaining. It's cultural pollution and the expression of the most thoroughly loathsome values. Was this supposed to be a comedy? I thought comedies were supposed to produce some laughs. Silly me. John Waters' talent is akin to that of Ed Wood's, except Ed Wood's was recognized as unadulterated crap by everybody, including himself.
That guy thinks it's racist against white people?
He does.
Wow.
And by the way, he's not the only one. I tried to limit a lot of these that deal in issues where I'm like, you don't even deserve the attention.
That is a fundamental misreading of the entire film. Also, like, there are racist white people. There are bad white people in the movie, but there's also good white people. I mean, Wilbur and Edna, and, you know, like, there's a lot of great people in the, like, you're not paying attention to the movie if that's what you think. Also, that person said that the music was like monotonous or something like that. That completely invalidates everything you're going to say after that anyway.
Yeah. Boring music is what he said. Here's Steven. By the way, all of these, just from the names alone, it sounds like some white dudes. Yeah. They might have their own thing going on. This movie sucked from the opening lines to the moment I walked out. That's his title. What is wrong with you people? This was the absolute worst movie in the history of film.
Oh, wow.
Hey. All right.
Surprisingly, we haven't gotten that many of those on the last couple of John Waters episodes.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah. There it is.
I have never walked out in the middle of a movie in my life, but this movie sucked. Every song in this movie, and there are way too many of them, had the same basic tune. And what a moronic plotline. Make fun of blacks and their dancing and fat people. Wow, what a movie plot. And what is the purpose of taking great actors like John Travolta for Christopher Walken and Michelle Pfeiffer and wasting their time making a movie like this? Every one of their parts could have been done by any Jake leg. I don't even know what that means. So if that's racist, I'm sorry. I don't know. Any Jake leg, and it wouldn't have made the movie any worse or better. What a total waste of talent. Absolute stupidity. None of the lines brought even a smile to my face, let alone a chuckle or laugh. I couldn't help but wonder what the other people in the audience were thinking when they laughed.
Another fundamental misreading of the film. And also, it sounds like they left halfway through the movie, so your opinion doesn't count anyway. And to complain that there is too much music
in a musical.
In a musical.
That's a good point.
It seems like an odd complaint. Is all
These people seem like, they're incels.
Yeah.
Half star though from Jalen with a Y, that's their actual name, says, if I have to hear Good Morning Baltimore one more goddamn time, I swear to God.
It's an earworm. It's a good song.
Evan gave it a half star and said, really didn't like the white savior bullshit that this entire movie is.
Well, I mean, that's valid, honestly. But
Steve NY30, so you already know where this is going, I think. Just
another Steve.
Another Steve.
Steve. Hey, you know what? Thank you, Steve, because most assholes in film are named Todd, so thanks.
Major disappointment. I enjoyed the original Hairspray in '88, thought the stage version was forgettable, but this new one, I actually had a hard time sitting through it. First off, the camera work is wooden. Music numbers suffer as a result. Everything just felt so flat and uninspired. And then John Travolta, wrong. His singing voice was terrible, and his Edna could barely move her face. She wasn't a woman. She was a plasticine sack that may have well been a mannequin. I just kept wondering, why isn't there a real drag queen playing the role, or even a campy guy, or even a talented and heavy real woman playing Edna? How about Bette Midler? Ooh, Bette. And the songs themselves, just noisy, unclever, not something I'll ever want to buy or sing along to. I remember hearing all sorts of hype about this movie when it came out, that it had really hit it out of the park. I just want to know how much money the producer spent to generate phony buzz. Everybody I talked to thought this was terrible. Michelle Pfeiffer can't sing either.
Oh, incorrect. there were, I remember, a lot of I don't know a lot of, but there were complaints about John Travolta's casting in this because he's not like a drag queen and he's not gay, which it's like the character is not a drag queen. The character is a woman and the character is also not gay. So yeah. I don't understand that argument. It's just a man portraying a character. It's just, they're just keeping with the tradition of casting a man in that role, but the character's sexuality does not come into play.
I think there is a side to that argument. I don't know that. I think I'm with you mostly, but like it just, I don't know. I could see where people might have an issue with it.
I think, I mean, because I was looking at a couple of times where, because of Travolta's movements, either in dance numbers or in, tight shots with him and Walken, you can see like the bunching up of the fat suit to almost to an unnatural position, and it's a little distracting, but not that much. I mean, and to be honest, as a point to that last thing, let's go back to Shakespeare. Like, dudes played women all the time, long before Divine started doing stuff. Like,
people wore blackface too. I don't think that argument's going to get you very far these days. But
I'm not going to think that Shakespearean times were the most enlightened period.
No, I was just talking more about the craft of like, Anyway.
I just mostly liked that review because I pictured Bette Midler reading it, being like, "Yeah, wait a second." Grolio says, after watching the movie, the first thing that pops in my head is a musical made for fat people to feel good. Don't know if that's true, but smells like propaganda from a mile away. The funny scenes are the ones where Michelle Pfeiffer and Christopher Walken appear. Oh, and to make it clear, Michelle Pfeiffer steals the whole movie from Nikki Blonsky. Now, the musical part, the songs are not long, but very long. At least 10 minutes a song. I needed to fast forward through the goddamn songs. 2 words more, and the vote I'm giving it is awful movie. As friendly advice, I would say, don't waste your time watching crap like this.
It feels like some of these people are watching a musical that hate musicals, and what were you expecting? People complaining about there being too many songs. Obviously, that guy's he's exaggerating by saying the songs are 10 minutes long. They're like 2 and 3 minutes long. They're pretty short songs, but
yeah, there's some people that seem surprised by musicals. There's some people that don't even know what they're watching. Or what it even was about before watching it. I don't know. I usually, when I go for these reviews, I go to IMDb, Letterboxd, and Amazon. Like, I'll look at the Amazon Prime reviews, any 1 stars there. Apparently, the biggest issue you can find on Amazon for these are 1-star reviews, because I haven't checked it recently, but at least at first, when you would order Hairspray 2007 on Amazon Prime streaming, you would get the movie Fracture from 2007, which is a psychological legal crime thriller starring Anthony Hopkins and Ryan Gosling, and directed by Gregory Howlett. It's the story of a man who shoots his unfaithful wife and then engages in a battle of wits with a young assistant district attorney, starring Anthony Hopkins, Ryan Gosling. There's some other people in there. I just like the idea that somebody missed the title card altogether. It was like, this is the remake of Hairspray? Where is John Travolta? But literally, like, there are like 30 1-star reviews of this movie, and they're all
Amazon just
Fracture.
Yeah, Amazon just sent them the wrong thing.
What about Katie? 1 star. This is the absolute last movie I expected to see Christopher Walken and John Travolta play a married couple in.
What was the first?
I don't know. Some of these just intrigue me. The Gabriel Ram, 1/2 star. I am extremely unsettled by John Travolta in this movie. I hate musicals, but I sat down to watch this because of somebody else. Thanks to this movie, though, I pinpointed why I hate musicals so much. And it's the reason why I hate Catholic Mass on Sundays. If you cut out the singing, the whole thing could have been over in 20 minutes. The music isn't good. I hate when the movie just stops to just show singing and dancing. Anyway, Hairspray. Yeah, man, not into it. John Travolta was revolting as whatever that was. A little girl wanting to be famous is also not a great storyline. There's also a race thing going on, but it's just white people doing the bare minimum and then looking like heroes because of it. The little girl straight up initiates a fight with police and runs away immediately. Whatever themes they tried to sell in this movie were shoved down our throats to make it as obvious as possible because we're fucking dumb. I saw this on Broadway in New York, by the way, and I hate it now, this movie, just as much as I did then.
I'm really getting tired of the anti-musical rhetoric of some of these reviews here. I don't understand why people sit down to watch a musical when they don't like musicals. I mean, also, I don't know why people don't like musicals, because I think I love musicals.
And even this guy, he at least knew he didn't like musicals. He said it was because of somebody else. He set it down, but he sat down and watched it. But I think at that point, you should immediately consider not mentioning the musical aspects of the musical in your hated review of this
right
movie.
If you already know that you went in not being a fan of musicals.
Yeah, we've already established you don't like that part. 1 star. Imagine the most white savior person you can. Now imagine if that person could dance. A movie has never filled me with as much rage as this one. It gets a single star for the music and cast, but missed me with every single piece of other shit in it.
Wow, that's intense.
Fuzzy, 1 star. Family movie night. I picked this because I wanted music and bright colors and figured the kids would enjoy it, and they did. But I kind of hated it. Travolta's performance is ostentatiously unostentatious, a mess of overdone accent and look at me self-concealment. And the movie as a whole is an uncritical mass of boomer cliches dancing equals sex equals revolution. Black people is amiable opportunities for white people to show their virtue, and social change is generational imperative. It kills me that the movie's argument against segregation is young people like this more than this is the right thing to do. There are some fun performances. Zac Efron's genuinely charming as a gawky teen, trying hard to be a cool teen. James Marsden is, as always, fantastic. Christopher Walken's miraculous ability to float while dancing is undimmed. But they're all stuck with such a dull, generic bunch of songs and a script that never lets anything surprise you.
Wow.
They went in.
They did.
And finally, Morris says, this movie sucks. It's rife with seemingly earnest performative activism and white saviorism. It leaves a sour taste in my mouth. And if it was trying to capture the campy satire of the original, they failed miserably. Other than a few great lines, it totally missed the mark when it comes to self-awareness. It lacks all the wonder dynamics of the first one, especially with the parents. Oh my God, I hate John Travolta in this. Fuck that man. This was awful. I felt sick whenever he was on screen. I also hate musicals. There was no reason to turn this into a musical. The songs range from bad to barely at par. And it was too sexual for no reason. Overall, it's a shallow mess with very little good to be said about it. I did not have a good time. First one's great. This one is skip.
There are a lot of people who passionately dislike John Travolta's portrayal in this.
Oh, I skipped most of them that had a problem with his accent.
I love it. I think his accent's hilarious. It's like the most just over the top Baltimore accent. It makes me think of that Mr. Ray. Remember that we talked about at the beginning of this series that John Waters was imitating when he was the narrator of Pink Flamingos.
I was going to say, I saw so many reviews that were like, what city did this fucker think he was in?
I mean, it's just like the most over the top, but I think it's funny. And I don't know. I like his performance in this. I mean, I don't know. A lot of these people, there's a lot of those reviews other than that. And other than the people who don't like musicals, which I don't know why you're even watching this. That doesn't make any sense to me. But a lot of them also seem to have an issue with the movie's portrayal of like segregation and stuff, which again, like, we're not trying to change the world with this movie. John Waters wasn't trying to change the world with the original movie. It's not supposed to be this like life, mind changing portrayal of what segregation was, of a fight against segregation in the 60s. That's part of the story. Obviously it's the biggest part of the story, but this isn't like a message movie necessarily, nor was the original one, like we talked about on the last episode.
I see. The thing is like, I try to be empathetic here to like, what would people be thinking in this situation? And it goes back to what, where I said with like Todd, where we talk about that, like with John Travolta, like, we've had issues recently with Scarlett Johansson was going to play a trans woman,
right?
And people are like, why don't you just cast a trans woman instead of Scarlett Johansson playing this role? And if Divine, even though it's weird, Divine is a gay man, a drag queen playing that role. And so you're casting John Travolta to play that role. John Travolta is neither gay nor a drag queen, and a secondary thing. So you're only doing it because that's what the other movie did it. I could see some people having an issue. Now, dude, I'm a cis white guy. I shut up because most of the time, because I know I could stand to shut up a lot of the time. So it's I don't have a problem necessarily with any of this stuff, but I am trying to be empathetic to see like where some people I could see where there are things. I ended up down at because one thing that did bother me about this movie is that, and I'm trying to remember back to our first time talking about Hairspray, but in Hairspray, I did feel like John Waters handled the actual segregation issue a little bit better. And that he did handle the biting aspect, like there was some commentary in there, and he was better at handling it than this movie. This movie candy coats everything. It's just like going back to what we were talking about with the music, the reason I thought it was funny when we talked about the music and Team America was I was like, man, that's so funny, because one thing I thought of when I was trying to think about my feelings of this is I was like, this movie treats racism like, I was like, because there are musicals that handle stuff a little more seriously and handle things as actual issues. And I'm like, what about, like, I don't know. And I thought of like Rent. And I was like, this is like if you took Rent and you did what Team America did. You have that song at the very beginning. It's like, everybody has AIDS.
Right.
We all have AIDS. And I'm like, that's what this movie is, kind of, with racism. And I was like, I was like, it's not, I don't know. And I was like, am I just overthinking it? I don't know. Because I was looking at stuff like, another thing I said that I would have a point on was they cut out the whole amusement park thing. And that actually caught my eye. That whole scene is like they throw a cherry bomb in the middle of the thing. Police think it's gunfire. They beat the fuck out of one of the black guys. And there is actual shit in there. This movie wipes that completely out. Tracy decides that, like, you know what we should do? We should create a protest, that we should do it. That was supposed to be Maybelle. She thought of that. These black people are sitting there and they are perfectly fine with Negro Day. They're okay with it the whole time in the fucking musical. They're like, this is just the way it is. It ain't no thing. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, this white girl comes along and teaches you, you can do better if you just.
Well, Motormouth Maybelle is in the same place that she's the one who tells them, like, we can't be okay with things being the way they are. Like, that's not Tracy that says that. It's, I mean, Tracy brings up doing a protest, but then Motormouth Maybelle is the one who tells everyone there in her record shop, like, we can't just say that this is okay to continue to exist this way. And she's the one that fires them up.
But I did read that one review, and it even stood out to me that, like, yeah, and then she starts the riot and she just runs away.
Yeah, it was. Yes, that does happen. Like, yeah, but
and I'm like,
but they
wow. I'm like,
they do tell her to run, like they do. Motormouth Maybelle does tell her you got to get out of here when that happens. So she doesn't just run out of like cowardice. She runs because she's been told to, and then she does also say that she's going to turn herself in afterwards.
Yeah, but in that, like, Maybelle starts the protest. Tracy gets arrested. Maybelle sets out on how to free her. Like, they're given some fucking like ownership of their lives, and it's like, wow. I don't know. For some reason, when I was watching it this time, I did start thinking about it. So I did start looking for it. I was like, am I overthinking that, or would anybody else think that? And if you look, there are plenty of people that have that issue with this movie. And I have the issue with Hairspray in general, and especially with the musical version, that are just like, we could just, because I knew there would always be people with, like, you know, you're saying it's not a world-changing movie or whatever, but there are going to be people that have an issue of like, oh, we can cure racism with dancing around and singing. Like, that was a thing. Like, as if it's not political policies and structures of society that were causing this in the 60s. It was just like, no, the kids, they were, you know, they taught us better. We're all good now.
I mean, I understand that point of view, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I don't think that that's. I mean, the whole white savior complex is an issue with dozens of movies, and I do think that at least, you know, especially with Motormouth Maybelle, there is some representation of an actual black person taking charge in this movie, but I do think that this movie was. It is an adaptation of a Broadway show, a Broadway show that was created for mass appeal. And yes, it does. It absolutely waters down the real issues that were facing people in the early 60s.
No pun intended.
As did John Waters' original movie, though. I mean, we talked about that a little bit last episode, where he knew that this movie's not like going to cure racism. Like, this movie's not made for that. He was making a comedy about the early 60s, where segregation was a major part of the plot. The movie wasn't designed as a message movie. The musical does make some changes that waters that down a little bit more. I agree with you on that. I don't think that there's any way to show, you know, in the Broadway on stage, doing the amusement park thing was probably a practical choice, because how do you do that on stage, right? They could have rewritten this movie that way, but I also really like the way that I Know Where I've Been, the song that Maybelle sings during the protest. I like the way that it works in the film a lot because of the placement of it, which is different than the placement in the original Broadway show. But you can watch this movie, and I mean, it has its heart in the right place, right? The way, as far as all of that stuff goes, it has its heart in the right place, and what it's showing, I think, is that the youth, the film's teenage characters, they're the ones who carry that heart, and this is very much a film about youth culture's optimistic thinking about how the future can be better than the present is. Because they're the ones who initiate change. It's Tracy, but it's also Seaweed and Penny and all the other kids. And little Inez has a much bigger role here than she did even in the Broadway show. In the Broadway show, Tracy wins Miss Hairspray at the end, not little Inez. So they did make that change, which I think is a very significant change and much better, in my opinion, than it worked in the Broadway show. But the optimistic thinking of these teenagers in this, yes, it can come across as a little naive, but teenagers are naive. they are, or at least they're not as jaded as like old fart like us might be. To me, that's part of the appeal of the movie, is how much heart and optimism it has, even if it's not even if it's not necessarily realistic. It's still that optimism and that belief that things can be better than they are now. But there's something about this movie that when at the end, like when they say the Courtney Collins show is now and forever integrated, something about the infectious joy of the way the movie plays out. When you're watching that, you can't help but like for a moment be like, oh yeah, you guys just cured racism. Like, it's just like, because you're so happy because of the experience of watching the movie, if that makes sense, that for a moment you're like, yeah, we did it. Then of course you're like, oh wait, this is just a movie. Ain't shit changed in 50 years hardly. That's the reality we live in. But the movie is such a joyful experience that it almost tricks your brain into thinking like, yeah, look at what these kids did back in 1962. Like, they fixed it, just because the movie makes you feel so happy, like during the course of watching it. It's like it does this thing to your brain where it tricks you into thinking, it tricks you into being naive as the characters can sometimes be.
Does that speak more to the general structure and nature of musicals?
It might. Yeah, it very well might. At least in a musical like this, it's a very upbeat, like happy musical.
I was going to say, I felt that way sort of, and then I was trying to think of movies that deal with like harder issues, like, I don't know, I'm not here to promote Rent as the greatest musical of all time, and people have found it problematic now, for crying out loud, but like it, at least treated certain issues that were happening in the 90s very seriously, as far as like what was going on, and yes, there was AIDS and there was drug abuse and there was all this stuff going on in Rent. Rent
is also like a much more serious endeavor than Hairspray is,
Yeah, like, but we keep saying John Waters didn't have a message movie, and the guy in every interview right now says this was my most like sneaky movie ever, because I did it so that even racists love it, and I was making a movie against racism. And like, so he clearly had the thought. I think you run a dangerous game. Again, I'm really trying to say is that I don't begrudge anybody who finds a lot of issues with this.
I get where they're coming from. I agree more with that stuff, with the white savior stuff, and it's people's view on how it approaches segregation, more so than I do like the John Travolta thing, which I think is just people looking for something to complain about. Because again, the character is not a gay character. It doesn't have to be played by a drag queen. Although if it were made today, it probably would be played by a drag queen, like somebody who has appeared on Drag Race or something. Which
I think today,
because now that like something like Drag Race has been on the air for so many years, at the time in 2007, that wasn't the case. But now, yeah, you could probably get somebody who was famous for being a drag queen to be in that role. But also, like, Adam Shankman is gay. Mark Shaman is gay. The producers, Craig, what's his name? Craig Zadan and Neil Marin, they're gay. Like these, and they all wanted to get John Travolta in this role. So obviously it wasn't an issue for them.
Yeah, it's so weird because like the thing about it is like, Um, on one hand, I'm like, actors act, and I'm like, people should try to put themselves in roles, but I also get casting people that are from situations where they may not have access to roles. I actually ended up down a whole rabbit hole where I wasn't even familiar really that much with aversive racism, and which is talking about like essentially like in a movie like this that you cast a bunch of black people, but you cast them to act black. Like they need to act like black people act. That's the thing they do. And then how that also promotes black people to act more black so that they can get roles like this, because these are the roles that are available for
They're being offered to them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, you better act like a black guy in this movie.
Yeah.
And so this needs to be you. So they get really adept at being a black guy. And so that's like a whole other topic. Anyway, I'm not even qualified to speak so much on that, except that I was reading a bunch about it. But and it also gets weird with like, I mean, because I mentioned like Scarlett Johansson, like playing the trans woman. Where that
well, see, I think that's a very different. I think that's a very different issue, because there are trans people who are looking for representation. You know,
yeah. Where I was going to go with it this time, though, also is that like where you might say actors get to act and stuff is like, can they fully understand that scenario? And it's also like there are different struggles that people go through. I can see people having offense to. I grew up as a fat kid, you know, but at no point in my life would I dare say like, oh, I also get what it's like to be black and you're not included. I'm a fat person. And I know people don't like me as much because I'm fat. And it's like, that's not the same. It's not the same thing.
Not the same thing. They're not equal.
It's like, and it feels like at some points in this movie, it's like also trying to push that a little bit. Like, oh, we all get it. We all want to be included. And on one hand, I get the optimistic side of that. We can all strive for better. We can all hope for the world to be better and accepting of everyone and all of that. But I also, like I said, I also get that I don't want to begrudge anybody who's also like, bro, not the same thing. Like, why are you just equating all these things and just making it all like bubblegum?
No, I mean, I completely understand that. And if somebody has an issue with that aspect, that's going back to the original John Waters screenplay, you know, because that's inherent there as well. So putting aside the movie's message, as far as like from a pure enjoyment factor, first of all, had you guys seen this before prior to this? This is the first time watch for you, Todd?
Yeah,
I've seen this movie I've seen this movie like 30 times. I watch it a lot. I just love this movie. It's just fun. I love the soundtrack and I love the song. So I've seen it like literally like, I mean, I don't know how many times, a lot. So from just a pure enjoyment factor, where were you? I mean, I've already shown my hand, obviously, but where were you guys at? What did you think? And I don't know. I know Gary likes musicals. I don't know where you stand on musicals, actually, Todd, because the only one we've talked about on the show is Little Shop of Horrors, which is kind of a crossover musical, even for people who don't necessarily like musicals.
Right. I enjoy a good musical. I've been to a lot of musicals. I've watched a lot of musicals. You know, I love a good earworm as much as anybody else. In terms of this, I liked it. I mean, just strict, you know, not picking it apart or anything. I liked it. I don't know that I would revisit it that much, just because I think my taste in musicals, it tends to lean, you know, a little bit darker, or, you know, to more odder material, like, you know, something a little bit stranger, I think. I mean, I like The Greatest Showman. You know, I like La La Land. It's, you know, very Hollywood story, coming of age type thing. I like Sweeney Todd. You know, I like Depp and Sweeney Todd. So I mean, my taste is my taste in general is all over the map. So my taste in musicals is no different. But yeah, in terms of this, I think, you know, the only thing that really stuck out to me that was kind of, I mean, I didn't hate it, but it was, I mean, I acknowledge that it was definitely a choice, was the really thick Boston accent on seemingly the only Baltimore, the really thick Baltimore accent on seemingly the only person affected by the Baltimore accent is Edna. So I was like, okay, I mean, that's a choice. But other than that, I had fun with it. It it was. I'm not scathing. I'm glad I watched it. Kat watched it with me again. This is another one. Mark it down, fellas. This is another Cinema Shock movie that I was actually able to get my wife to watch with me, and yeah, it's fun. I like it just fine. Would I revisit it again? I mean, I'm not gonna complain if somebody else is watching it, but like, I wouldn't be like, "Hey, Hairspray." Like, that's probably not gonna happen for me. But yeah, I liked it just fine.
I felt the same way. I'd seen this when it first came out, I remember, and I was like, all right, fine. Like I didn't think that much of it, and until this, hadn't thought much of it again. And I don't think I had seen the original, or if I had, I didn't remember it when we saw that. But now that I saw the original, this one, like I said, for some reason, I don't know, man, maybe it was in activist mode or something, but I thought of all that stuff and started seeking it out. I was like, this is fucking bubblegum as shit on some actual things. And I was like, this is real weird. And but also there was something that struck me weird about the music. And like Good Morning Baltimore is an earworm. There's some good songs in it.
I think Good Morning Baltimore is like the quintessential like Broadway show opening tune. That is how you start a show.
That one. And I've got no like personal issue with the movie. Like, I think it's fine. I think, like I said, I could see why people would find it problematic. For what it's worth, I looked up Reddit threads because I was really curious about this, and I started searching, and just like people were like, what do black people think about Hairspray? And there are black people that are fine with Hairspray, and there are black people that are like, nah, fuck it. And they're like, so it's a mix. So it's fine. Yeah. It's just, it is what it is. It exists. But I missed the actual 60s music in this movie, like the literal soundtrack for like John Waters' movie.
Yeah, but that would be hard, I think, to translate into a musical unless you were doing like a jukebox kind of musical, which would be hard to tell this story if they're just singing like existing songs.
I never thought I'd say this, but because John Waters did the movie already, like, I could take or leave this movie. Like, it's not as good as John Waters' version.
I honestly think that it's a vastly different experience than John Waters' movie. I think that they I mean, yes, it's the same story, but they take incredibly different approaches to the material, I think.
I'm just saying, I could see this movie as the movie that's made in a fucking like HBO comedy series where like somebody is making a musical and they're like, the director is just like, like, oh, you know what you should do here? The police are coming. You should dance. And then it gets the police to dance away too. And it's like, and we'll talk about it on Negro Day. Like, what, excuse me? Like, no, we're having Negro Day on Thursday because we really feel like we should bring that back in celebration, though, of Negro Day. And they're like, I don't think that's okay. And they're like, no, it's fine. I'm kind of pudgy, so I get it. I get what it's like. And it's like, I don't know. I was thinking of that the second time I watched this, and I'm like, that's fucking how they made this movie. That feels like what would happen to make this movie.
I mean, I get that. I mean, this movie is same with the original, but its view of like its portrayal of the civil rights movement is, let's say, less than accurate to history. But for this movie, I mean, like I said, I like musicals a lot anyway, but I love the music in this movie. I think the songs are super infectious. I think the dance choreography is super fun. And I think one of the biggest assets to this movie that make it very successful to me is the cast. I think the cast is just really outstanding. I think Nikki Blonsky is wonderful. I mean, when Waters described Ricki Lake after casting her in the original film, he said that something along the lines of, if the audience doesn't love Tracy, the movie doesn't work. And that's the case here as well, which is why I think that they kind of crushed it with their casting with Nikki Blonsky, because she is just a big ball of joyful energy that you can't help but love watching. She's sweet. Her character is sweet but mischievous. She doesn't take shit from anyone. It's it's a shame that like this movie should have made Nikki Blonsky a star, but in like this 16 years since its release, like she's continued to work steadily, but she's never done anything that's like as high profile, even approaching the profile of this. But then there's the rest of the cast where you've got, I mean, I mentioned John. I like John Travolta a lot in this. I think he's having a lot of fun. Christopher Walken, just getting to watch Christopher Walken dance is wonderful.
Yeah.
Amanda Bynes is perfect, I think, as Penny. Allison Janney is, I mean, she's great at everything. Elijah Kelly is insanely talented. And like, I feel like we should be seeing him in more stuff. He's the guy who plays Seaweed. He's very good in this.
He's so good
as a performer, as a singer. Like he's really great. I mean, Zac Efron kills it. Queen Latifah as Maybelle is incredible. I mean, her performance of Big Blonde and Beautiful is one of the best numbers in the movie, I think. But I think the cast all around, and I've already talked about how much I like James Marsden in this. I mean, there's just the cast all around. I think everyone is perfectly cast in this movie. And the combination of that with a bunch of songs that I really like. I mean, my favorites are Without Love, I think is really great. And I love You're Timeless to Me, both for the song and for the way that it's filmed, and getting to watch John Travolta and Christopher Walken dance in that. It's my favorite sequence in the movie. I just think it's a ton of fun.
Well, can I just say that if you're curious where this is not funny. The most recent update. So in 2008, around October, there was an incident in the airport between Nikki Blonsky and Bianca Golden, the then contestant of America's Top Model, according to Today.com. There was a heated exchange where Bianca Golden and her family were wanting to have seats at the airport. And this was in the Bahamas or somewhere. And Nikki Blonsky was holding the seats. Her and her father were holding the seats. And so they couldn't have them, and then called them the N-word. And this led to a physical altercation in which Bianca's mother said something, and Nikki Blonsky's father got up and punched her in the face.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And it said, according, she was on the Tyra Banks show later, Bianca Golden was, said the argument escalated to a physical fight. Carl Blonsky punched my mom. He knocked her out. He hit my mom with such force, she stumbled back. And when she stumbled back, the whole Blonsky family got up and attacked my mom. Nikki took her foot and kicked my mom in her vagina, and my mom was eventually knocked out. But Nikki kicked my mom. I grabbed her arm. She grabbed my earring. Her mom sat on her to get her off of me because she saw what was happening. And anyway, Nikki and her father, Carl, were arrested and taken in. The charges were later dropped, but that was just, I imagine that's a fun situation.
Well, that probably didn't help her career at all.
That's what I was saying earlier. You're like, haven't seen much else. I'm like, yeah, there's stuff.
When did that happen?
Well, I mean,
when was that? What year?
This was the year after, actually.
Oh, 2008. So yeah, okay, that does explain a lot then. Because she's really good in this. So it's like, why didn't she get more roles? But okay, now I guess that's probably a factor.
Yeah, I'm laughing just because it's just like, it's ridiculous.
It's a ridiculous.
Like, what is this?
It's a ridiculous scene to probably have witnessed as well.
Yeah. So anyway, there was a whole thing there. And,
well, I mean, a few years after this, Amanda Bynes kind of dropped off the planet, and
but she had some mental health issues.
That's what I'm saying.
Like she wasn't being like a shitty person or anything. She's just just addressing some of her own issues.
Yeah,
so she has, and then and then Christopher Walken, still Christopher Walken,
still crushing it.
Did you guys see him? Did you guys see him as Captain Hook in Peter Pan when he did the live?
No.
I remember, but I didn't watch it.
It was hard to watch. It was like, oh no. It was like, oh, this isn't the Christopher Walken we remember, and it was just.
Man, he's still fantastic and stuff, right? He's still good. I mean, but live television is very difficult.
Yeah,
like no matter who you are or how good you are, like that's tough.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any favorite songs in it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I noticed right off the bat the Good Morning Baltimore, and I distinctly recall was just like, oh,
That's how you start a musical.
That is,
and honestly, You Can't Stop the Beat is a great final number. Like that's how you end the musical.
Yeah,
Big,
I was going to say the bookends are the best to me.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah, those are two of the best in the movie. But yeah, I think Big Blonde and Beautiful is really really great. But there's something about Your Timeless to me. It's just the performance of them, and I think it's a really sweet song too. I mean, it's a song that is from the point of view of two people who are getting older, who are still committed to each other, and I think it's just it's very sweet and very funny at the same time.
I give all credit to that though to Travolta and Walken.
Yeah,
I think those two together, like they do such a sweet job with each other, and like
they really do.
And them, and I agree that them dancing together is just like probably the height of the movie. Honestly,
yeah, it's magic. It really is. I mean, I think that a lot of the movie works for me really well because Adam Shankman, who I would not say is like one of my favorite directors by any means. I haven't seen several of his movies. I've seen this one. I've seen Rock of Ages, which is a movie.
I was going to say he did Rock of Ages.
Yeah, it's a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. I really like Rock of Ages, while also admitting that like it's not a good movie, but I still enjoy it.
Well, it stars Russell Brand, which is super popular right now.
No, there's a love song between Russell Brand and Alec Baldwin in it that probably is going to play a lot differently now than it did 10 years ago when I first watched that movie. But yeah, I think Shankman's background as a choreographer and a director, like I think that helps the movie because I think he understands both the language of live theater and the language of cinema, because those two things are wildly different experiences. And I think his background in both helps him to avoid the pitfalls of other musicals turned movies, because he understands that some things work well on stage that don't necessarily work well on film, or he needs to change how it's portrayed on film for it to work. Like there's a lot of stuff going on here that his background as a choreographer and a stage director really, I think, helps the movie, because he's also directed several, he's like 5 or 6 movies into his career at this point. So he also knows what works on film and which ones to tweak in one way or the other to make it work in this movie,
It's kind of like seeing a martial arts movie that was made by somebody who very well understands the world of martial arts or is a practitioner themselves. Like they know what looks good and and how it works.
Yeah, but they also have to understand the language of cinema, because
exactly.
That's Bruce Lee, I think, is a great example of that, because he even knew that, hey, I have to slow down my punches.
I got to slow down. Yeah.
To make them look right on film. It looks cool in real life.
Yeah, like with wrestling. You can do like regular punches, but those aren't as fun as like Steve Austin, like rearing way back
exactly.
coming in.
So you gotta do what works for the camera, right? Exactly. Do you guys have any further viewing? Any movies that, like, if someone enjoys this or something that would pair well with this, or anything that you would recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I've got one, and in case you haven't heard it mentioned enough in the episode already. From 1986, directed by Frank Oz, written by Howard Ashman, based on the original film by Roger Corman and Charles B. Griffith, featuring Christopher Guest and Bill Murray as Arthur Denton.
I love that the most random roles to mention in this movie. It's obviously Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah, it's Little Shop of Horrors. If you're going with a musical, keep the party going. Just get another high energy, full of earworms. I think this would make a great double feature.
Yeah, just watch Grease or Footloose or Coyote Ugly or something. I don't know.
Only one of those is a musical.
Yeah, but they all just have the story down. You get it.
A very, very enthusiastic recommendations from Gary Horn today. I mean, I would probably say Grease as well. Just because make it a John Travolta double feature, watch Grease. I would recommend Grease too, but I haven't seen it in a long time, and I don't remember if I like it or not. But Grease or Mamma Mia, why not? Mamma Mia came out. Mamma Mia is great. It's fun, and that came out a year after this, and it's another music Broadway show turned movie musical that also is a jukebox musical, or you could watch Rock of Ages for an Adam Shankman double feature. Speaking of jukebox musicals,
I'd be down with that. That'd be good. I don't know why you're so anti Coyote Ugly.
I mean, I like
Leanne
Coyote
Rimes
Ugly.
Can't Fight the Moonlight. They sing that in there. So,
yeah, but it's not a musical.
The Dance on the Barn of music. So, I don't know.
Yeah, so did Pee Wee Herman.
It's true.
How about She's the Man, starring Amanda Bynes?
Well, for years, New Line wanted John Waters to write a sequel to the original Hairspray, setting it in the late 60s. But as we mentioned on our last episode, he didn't really have any desire to do it. But then in 2009, after the success of the musical film, New Line came back again, asking Waters to once again write a sequel. And this time he did it. He wrote a script. The sequel was called White Lipstick, which was one of the working titles Waters had used for Hairspray when he was writing that one. In describing the script, Waters said, "It's about when the real 60s hit and the Corny Collins show isn't popular anymore. It's the new hip coming in," which really happened. And then other plot lines that Waters discussed for the sequel included one where Link pretends to be British in order to help his singing career, because this is like after the Beatles have become popular. And he has pimples on his forehead under a Beatles wig that he wears, and the pimples sing to him. Little Inez turns into an Angela Davis radical, and Tracy is still famous, but is being ridiculed for her weight, while Edna has slimmed down to the point where Wilbur has lost interest in her. So it sounds very much like a John Waters script, basically.
I know. As you were reading this, I was like, man, what world has occurred that I'm like, I miss John Waters doing this.
That definitely sounds like a John Waters script, but the project never got past the script page. And, you know, while it was intended to be a follow-up to this musical more so than the original film, they didn't actually get to the point in the development where they ever wrote any songs for it. So that never happened. He would like write in his script where a song should be, but no songs ever, it didn't make it that far to where they got into the songwriting aspect of it. But there was still one more Hairspray production to come. So back in 2013, NBC decided to revive this old tradition from like the 50s and 60s of showing live broadcasts of popular musicals on TV. And the first one they aired was The Sound of Music Live. It was a big success. It was such a success that they followed it up the next year with Peter Pan, and then the following year with The Wiz, which actually featured Hairspray's own Seaweed, Elijah Kelly, as the Scarecrow, which is the role, I believe, that Michael Jackson played in the film version of The Wiz.
Mm.
So after those were all successful, they all got good ratings. So their next choice for a live musical broadcast was Hairspray, and they hired Harvey Fierstein himself to adapt it for television, in addition to reprising his role as Edna Turnblad. And his version was very close to what had been seen on Broadway, with only one song cut. There's a song called "The Big Dollhouse," which is not. It got cut from the movie version as well, so that's not in Hairspray Live. And then there are two other songs that had been added, that were added to his version that had been written specifically for the movie that weren't in the original Broadway show. But otherwise, as far as like we talked about how they moved around songs in the timeline a little bit in the movie. His version that aired on NBC was closer structurally to the original Broadway show. So in this version, a newcomer named Maddie Bailio was cast as the new Tracy Turnblad after a nationwide search, although Ricky Lake and Marissa Jarrett Winocour both have cameos as workers for Mr. Pinky's. Ricky Lake has a cameo in the movie, too. I don't think we mentioned. She's like a William Morris agency agent, I think, in the audience. Yeah, it's very small, but she's there. Martin Short plays Wilbur in Hairspray Live, which is wonderful casting. Kristen Chenoweth plays Velma. Ariana Grande plays Penny. Jennifer Hudson is Motormouth Maybelle. Andrea Martin is Prudy Pringleton, and Sean Hayes appears as Mr. Pinky. And then you've got Billy Eichner and Rosie O'Donnell both in like small parts. Rosie O'Donnell plays like the gym teacher. But Hairspray Live, like every previous version of Hairspray that's been made, was a huge success. Something like 9 million people watched it live, like the night that it aired, which even in 2016, most people were still streaming at that point, but people tuned in live to watch it. I didn't. I watched it on Hulu the next day, I think. But it was a big success. And there's something about Hairspray, I think, that's timeless. I think there's a reason that people keep going back to this particular well. And I think a lot of its success goes back to Waters' initial concept for it. You know, he managed to go pretty much as mainstream as anyone could go. I mean, he's got a Broadway musical on his resume, right? John Waters went from doing underground movies to Broadway. But he never lost a sense of what makes his films unique. So as we record this episode, John Waters just a few days ago, like within the last week, received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So for a guy who began his career making underground comedies that were designed to shock the squares, like that's a pretty big deal. That's quite the career arc. But, you know, there is a reason that we're still talking about John Waters more than half a century after his career began. His work is very distinct. He has a unique voice that's instantly recognizable, as instantly recognizable as any of our other great auteurs. Like you can watch a Terry Gilliam movie and immediately know it's a Terry Gilliam movie. You can watch a Stanley Kubrick movie and immediately recognize it as a Stanley Kubrick movie because these guys have a very distinct style and a very distinct voice. John Waters' voice might be very different from guys like that, but it's still very much like, this is John Waters. Nobody else could do this. Even people who try to do it are clearly imitating John Waters. So even as he's gone like a little more mainstream, he's always managed, I think, to keep a layer of filth in all of his work. I mean, for proof, just go look at his last film, at least his last one to date, the NC-17 rated A Dirty Shame, filled with movie stars, Johnny Knoxville, Selma Blair. You know, it's got big names in it, but it is a dirty movie. And it was rated NC-17 at a time when people weren't making NC-17 movies anymore. But hey, it's John Waters, and that's what he's gonna make the movie that he wants to make. And I think that's something that I personally love about him. But A Dirty Shame and Waters' other post-Hairspray films are not going to be part of this series. They're going to have to wait until we decide to revisit John Waters in a future series, if that's what the people want, I guess. So let us know if that's something you want to see. But for now, it's time to move on to our next episode and our next series on this podcast. So we are leaving Mr. Waters behind. Well, fellas, do we want to go ahead and announce the next episode before we go? Because we're not doing a roulette. We're doing something kind of special the next episode. I think we should go ahead and announce it here. So we're normally at the end of one of our series, we're going to do a roulette episode, you know, where we randomly pick a movie. We're not doing that next week. We are going to do a roulette episode before our next series starts. But if as of this recording, like a couple of weeks ago, we did our first Cinema Shock live event, kind of a kickoff to the spooky season. And it was a screening of the 1922 silent classic horror film, Nosferatu. Yeah. So we decided,
and it was a complete success. All the women showed their boobs. It was so weird at the end of it. Like it was just, everybody got naked. And I don't know. We're going to do more live events though, so look forward to those.
So weird. Like when Gary doesn't know what kind of joke to make, and he just starts talking about his dick or boobs.
That's the go-to.
But we decided we were able to, like, you know, talk about some behind the scenes stuff, but obviously we were wanting to show the movie and didn't want to talk about it for 2.5 hours like we do on our normal podcast episodes. Yeah. We didn't want to run people off by doing that, but we wanted to do a deeper dive into the history of that movie because it is such a fascinating history and because it's such a seminal film in the history of not only horror cinema, but cinema in general. So we are going to do an episode as sort of let's call it the Cinema Shock Halloween special. We're going to talk about F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu. It is very easy to find online to stream because it's in the public domain, I think. So it's in a lot of places. Just do a little bit of research and make sure the version you're watching is a decent version, because since it's in public domain, there's a lot of shitty versions of it out there. But we're going to be talking about Nosferatu for Halloween on Cinema Shock, and I'm very much looking forward to it. It's going to be a ton of fun. Well, that's it for this week, guys. Nice. Where can you be found on the internet?
I am at This Is Gary Horn, all spelled out on social media. That's on Instagram and Twitter. If you like wrestling, I host This Is Pro Wrestling. This is Pro Wrestling on YouTube and at TIPW Show on Instagram. I also work for the National Wrestling Alliance, and you can access their links in their bio on Instagram. At NWA on October 28th. We'll be in Cleveland, Ohio. November the 4th, we'll be in Nashville, Tennessee. November the 17th and 18th, we'll be down in Florida, like Sarasota and somewhere else. I don't remember. I'll tell you later.
It's on the internet. Also, Twitter doesn't exist anymore, Gary. It's now called X.
X? Well, I just read what's in front of me like Steve Carell.
Nope, that's it's not Steve Carell who does that. It is Ron Burgundy who does that.
Ron Burgundy and Anchorman. Sorry. I messed up the joke again.
Talk about your dick. Hurry.
Like movies.
I'm working my way through the entire Star Trek franchise in chronological order for now on my show, Computer Resume Podcast. Available now wherever you get all of your part. Yep.
Good thing you don't talk for a living.
I know. Computer Resume Podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts and on all the socials at Computer Resume. And I'm at Mr. Todd A. Davis on Facebook, X, Instagram, Letterboxd, D&D Beyond, as long as they behave themselves.
Now talk about your dick.
And I am
it is adequate. My dick is adequate.
I call mine Samson because when I trim my pubes, I can't get hard anymore.
That doesn't even make sense.
You cut Samson's hair, he's not strong anymore. Come on, read your Bible.
I mean, I know the story. Well, I am at Justin_Bishop on Instagram, and I'm also on some other stuff, but I don't use them. Well, I'm on Letterboxd. I do use Letterboxd a lot. So Instagram and Letterboxd. The show is at cinema_shock on Instagram, X, Facebook, pretty much everywhere. Check out all of our episodes as well as links to our Discord and our merch at cinemashock.net. As always, like, rate, review, or just share this with all of your friends any way that you know how. Until next time,
may the wings of liberty never lose a feather.
And be excellent to each other.
Johnny, it's the times, they are a-changin'. Something's blowing in the wind. Fetch me the keys, would you, hun?
That's not even from this movie.
I know.
And I was going to say, did he sing? Did he sing?
Todd took a line from the last movie and tried to turn it into a song, which doesn't exist in this.
Yeah, which is what I did with the opening. I just sang it. So I just took this line and just sang it.
This is why you go straight to movie.
Well, here's the thing. I'm concerned with what I'm going to do talking about a silent film.
We'll be back with our bonus episode, Why Nikki Blonsky is a Racist. And how weird it is. She's the savior white girl in Hairspray.